first time I actually saw a full apparition. I've been sensitive as long as I can remember, so feeling spirit energy and possibly receiving information regarding them as pictures in my mind is something I'm familiar with. But I generally don't see them or interact with them. My sister and I decided to live together, and she bought a house built in the late 1930s. I've always liked old houses for various reasons. Well, from the first night I spent there, I felt very specific energy that seemed to attach to me. It felt female, and I got the impression she was not thrilled about either myself or both of us moving into her territory. Always watching over my shoulder with disapproval, other things occurred there as well, but this is mainly about her. It seems she's always watching me and grumpy about everything I did. Anyway, a few months living there, and I got sick with strep throat and was in bed sleeping when I suddenly woke up with the feeling of being watched particularly strong. I opened my eyes, and there standing in the doorway to my room was a lady I'd never seen before. She looked solid, like a living person. I can see every detail except shoes, because she didn't have any limbs past the hem of her blue house dress, so nothing from below the knee. Her expression was of stern disapproval, but no malice. She had salt and pepper brown hair to her shoulders and looked to be in her 40s or 50s. I blinked and she winked out of existence, leaving me staring, confused, at a now empty doorway. I knew immediately she was the one always looking over my shoulder, from the frown on her weathered face and the energy she gave off. I have never since actually physically seeing a spirit, and was shocked by how oddly normal and solid she was. I lived there only for a year and a half, and that was the only time I actually saw her. She messed around with things here and there, and her opinion of me never seemed to improve. Nothing about her was frightening or felt bad or like to think she was just checking in on my sick butt for whatever reason. So yeah, that's it. The house had a vortex, and many things came and went, and there were other weird things that happened there, but I'll never forget her. My sister still lives there, and she says activity settled down once I moved out, and only occasionally the odd thing will happen. Anyway, that's the one and only time a spirit showed itself to me, and I thought I'd share. The wooden cane was heard crossing the wooden porch. This story was told by my great-great-grandfather, who was there the night the strange event occurred. The story is passed down through the generations in my family, and allegedly is a true story. This was what I was told by my father. My great-great-grandfather, James, had a cousin who suffered from polio that left him crippled and weak. So much so that the young boy walked with a limp and a cane that he had to carry with him in order to get around. The boys continued to worsen with time, and the weakness and the paralysis of the polio virus began to affect his ability to breathe, and the young boy passed away at the age of 12 years from respiratory failure. A few years after the young boy had died, his younger sister developed pneumonia due to developing influenza. In the early 1900s, there were no modern antibiotics or treatments for the pneumonia or the flu, and sadly the young girl's condition worsened. My great-grandfather, along with other members of the family, were visiting the mother and father of this sick girl, and just around 8 p.m., the wind picked up around the old cabin, and the dogs outside began barking and howling a strange and mysterious bark that James said he had never heard a dog make before. It was then that everyone heard the sound of a cane going across the wooden porch of the cabin, The sound had no sooner started that it was silent, the dogs also silent. Then suddenly the sound started again, a steady thudding of a cane before the quiet whimpers. Then again, all silent. A short time later, it was found that the little girl had died. My great-grandfather James never believed in ghosts and thought it was a strange coincidence, but he said that night definitely made him wonder if the girl's older brother didn't come to take his sister to the other side. Dancing Ghost. Story not mine, but someone my mom knew. I think her uncle, her dad's friend. We'll just call him Dan. Dan used to work in a medium distance place. He used to come from a station. Whenever he would come, he would see this girl dancing at the end of the station. Nothing in front of her asking for money or anything. Just dancing. He didn't think much of it, as he'd seen some pretty weird shit in his life. For the first few weeks, he would just notice, but soon he realized that no one else seemed to look at her. But oh well, he thought. Well, this one day, there was a kid with his parents playing around with a ball. He threw the ball and it went across the station, and the barnland where the station end path ended. The mother saying something to the child, something as to not throw a ball towards Dan's direction, directing to the family, and he saw as the father went and got the ball. He watched as the father threw the girl twice, like right inside and outside, walked through her. Dan got horrified. He got up from his seat and went over to the tea stall and asked the man working there, "Hey, do you see that girl?" "Which girl, sir?" "The girl that's dancing." "Sir, there is no girl that is dancing on the station." The man asked Dan to sit down and gave him a cup of tea, because he was freaking out. And then he explained that there was a girl that used to play music and dance here. She lived a few minutes away, but she wanted to become a dancer, but she was bullied by the boys that also lived nearby. And one day they made a video of her. And since it was a small area, she was getting more and more bullied as she was stared at everywhere she went. And one day, while sitting here in the station, she decided to give up on her life and jump in front of the train. Red Face Encounter. This happened to me and a group of friends a couple of years ago when I was about 19. I've done a ton of research, turned up with nothing similar. So one night, me and two friends that I haven't seen in a while recently got back into contact. I was bored, so I hit them up like, "Hey guys, I know it's been forever, but you all want to go out and go on a night hike?" They were down and said they'd be right over. Me, excited to go for the night woods walk, smoke some weed. Before you say, "Oh, you were just high," it's important to the story. And they picked me up and we head out. We go get some food on the way, and while there I offered if they wanted to smoke, which they declined because they don't smoke. So me, stoned, them, sober as a bug, we get on the back roads to go to a patch of woods with paths, and while we're driving I see it. On the side of the road, laying on its side, like someone huddled over in the cold, had a bright red face, almost like crazy bad road rash or something. It had a sheen to it. It was also dressed in dark raggedy robes, like the ones you see in fantasy monsters or witches. It scared the living shit out of me, but I was also so excited to go into the woods. I thought to myself, okay, that was scary as fuck, but you're probably just a little bit too baked and saw an old trash can. You're fine. Do not say anything to the girls because they'll definitely get a bad feeling and our night hike will end there. so I was silent about it and never mentioned it. Then we get to the parking lot of the woods. I'm looking at my phone and one of my friends in a scared tone says, "What the fuck is that?" I was overcome with fear instantly, like I had an instinct or something, and without looking up to mutter out, "What is it?" "The shit chills my bones to this day," she said. "I don't fucking know. It's like a homeless man with a bloodied face watching us from the pavilion." I'm crapping myself at this point, and the other friend says, "He's just watching us. It looks like his clothes are made of rags." I said, "Let's just get the hell out of here." Told him exactly that on the road earlier, but thought I was just crazy. I was so frazzled about the whole thing, I tried every way to rationalize it. We thought maybe it's a black trash can with a red dome lid, and the bag was over the edge. So I went back the next day, and there was absolutely nothing under the pavilion. No barbecue, no trash can, just a table. It took me a year to go back, and I still won't go after dark. Encountered a weird shadow. This happened a few years ago, and it stuck with me since then, purely because of how terrifying it was. So me and my brother have the same room. We have a double roof bed, and I sleep under the upper part. The bed isn't really comfortable. Whenever I slept on it, my back would hurt a lot in the morning. Point is, I would occasionally go sleep with my mom, since her bed was really comfy and cozy. One night, when I decided to sleep at my mom's, I woke up for no apparent reason. I checked the timer, and it was around 3 or 4 a.m. This wasn't a very big surprise, because this would happen a few times a month. But this one felt different. After readjusting myself in the bed, while looking at the open door on my left that would have led to the hallway, a black silhouette of a head just appeared, peeking at me. My eyes opened up wide immediately, but I closed them shortly after, but still had them a little open so I could see the figure. At this point, my heart started racing, more than it's ever done in my life. It would not go away. It would just stand there, staring at me, not moving an inch, as if it was making sure I would try to not do something. The staring went on for probably 30 or 40 seconds. I don't truly know how long, and I did not dare to move to my right to check what time it was. After those extremely long seconds, the figure proceeded to go somewhere else, I guess. Of course, I was still extremely scared, so I couldn't just sleep after that. After some time had passed, I noticed that the door started closing. We didn't have the balcony open, so it couldn't have been the air doing that. At the same time, I never noticed any arm pulling the door or anything like that. Maybe it was just too dark or my eyes were too closed to see it, but whatever. I didn't sleep the whole night. I just kept looking at the door and anticipating what was going to happen next. But nothing else happened after that. I noticed it was getting brighter outside, so I kept thinking of getting up and checking the house. Once it became pretty bright outside, I turned to my right to look at what the time was, and it was about 6 a.m. I finally had gotten the courage to get up and cautiously opened the door leading to the hallway to check if anything was wrong. I checked every single room, but I didn't find anything wrong. All the balcony doors were locked. The doors leading outside the rest of the flat also completely locked. To say the least, I was very relieved but very confused. At this point, my mind had already raced through a million different thoughts of what this figure could have been. Could have been a burglar, but I didn't notice any door unlocked or tampered with. I told the story to my brother. He told me that maybe it was him, because he would occasionally check up on us at night to make sure that we were okay. If it was, though, I would have been able to discern his facial features, right? The thing I saw was a pitch black silhouette, no hair, no nothing. At least I should have been able to recognize his long hair. I honestly have no idea what I could have been other than a weird spirit just deciding to pay us a visit. Ask Reddit 1. Driving through the night from Mississippi to arrive in South Carolina by daybreak, I was on a pretty tight schedule to catch a ride from Greenville up to Pennsylvania for a friend's wedding. Right on the outskirts of Birmingham, Alabama, I turned into a gas station that's normally pretty brightly lit. I've been this way many times before. However, on this weirdly black windy night, the gas station is incredibly dim. And strangely, there's nobody out. I mean, nobody. I haven't encountered any oncoming traffic in miles, and there's no one in the gas station but the clerk. It's around 1:30 a.m. I get a super spooky feeling as I pay for my gas and cheap gas station coffee. As I pull out from the dim parking lot back into the highway, just minutes away from the interstate ramp that'll take me towards Atlanta, my headlights land on a white figure standing dead in the center of my headlights, almost seeming to glow against the pitch black night. Standing perhaps a step back from the highway on a very narrow rocky shoulder is a man dressed in what I honest to God think to this day were KKK robes with the hood up. He was staring directly into my eyes, holding a picket sign with handwritten words, "Jesus will return today, May 9th, 2016. The end is finally here." Needless to say, I noped the hell out of there as fast as I could. The creepiest thing was that to exit the parking lot, I had to drive directly towards this man before turning left on the highway. I'll never forget the stare down. Me, perplexed and freaking the crap out. Him, emotionless as a statue, staring at me until I was out of sight. Seven. Not a truck driver, and this falls under creepiest and not paranormal. A little after 9/11, about a year later, my ex and I, both black and both active duty, are traveling across America for an adventure to get our next duty station instead of flying out. We were in the Midwest, I think near the Oklahoma or Arkansas border on Interstate 40. We were on a 2-lane, and in the left lane about to pass a truck driver and then go back into the right lane. As we got about midway, the truck driver started driving into our lane. We slowed down. We went back over. We speed up. He crept over again. I was driving, by the way. He clearly did not want me to drive past him. I slowed down again, sped up even faster. He completely cut us off, and I ended up driving 85 miles an hour in the dirt to avoid being hit by the driver. I almost lost control. I got back on the road, and I continued the speed until I couldn't see him in my rearview mirror. That night we went to a hotel to check in. The clerk was acting funny. People were staring at us. We didn't feel comfy at all. Even when the clerks asked what brought us here, we were like, "Oh yeah, just some active duty military here. Going on our next duty station and wanted to drive across America." We went straight to our room and didn't come out until we checked out. The next day we went back out to our car, and there was a bullet hole in our bumper. My car at the time was brand new, as in a few days before I had just driven it hot off the lot. And I was proud of my car, so I did the 365 checks a lot, like the rental company does. And my car was pristine the day before when we were in New Mexico. Not only were we almost driven off the road and almost killed, but we were shot at some point. Eight. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in a desolate, high desert area east of LA. The shortcut was all two-lane road through total nothingness, except for passing through Amboy. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town near as far below sea level as Death Valley, with dormant volcano and lava field on one side and a salt flat on the other. It was also, at the time, a hotspot for satanic group activity. So I was driving by myself in the afternoon. I stopped in Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign, just to prove I was there to friends who dared me to take the route on I-40. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I'm driving north through a canyon with grass high on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down and see a red Pontiac Fiero stop sideways across both lanes. A suitcase opens and clothes scattered everywhere. 2 bodies lying face down on the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so, and their hair on their back of their neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under my seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and chamber a round. Something seemed very wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable. It was the horror movie move. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive, past the guy in the road on his left, swerve to the right of the woman, behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it, drove the line as I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it and either of the bodies on the road. I continued forward a couple 100 feet and slowed down so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror, I saw that the 2 bodies had gotten up to their knees and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that time, my foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me if I'd gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Somehow, I do not think I would have been good. Sometimes real life can be scarier than a movie. Nine. I'm from Laredo. Currently live here going to college. The scariest thing to me in Laredo is the old abandoned hospital down south. Now it's scary for many reasons. Some simply creepy, others kind of fucked up. The first floor is more creepy because of all the heroin needles and shit. It's kind of at the floor where hobos and people who don't want to be bothered shoot up. I don't know if they still shoot up there. I visited it once in high school and never again. The other floors don't have anything actually scary. They have a really creepy vibe though. Like, don't go alone and don't go towards the room that makes a lot of noise. The worst floor is the one with the morgue on it. I don't really believe in ghosts, but if they exist, it'd be on that floor. At night, you're guaranteed to find something weird. We went with what scared me half to death first, was we heard beeping, like for those heart monitors, or whatever they're called. We came to the door, and it was unplugged and turned off, but I swear we heard that exact sound. And the room where the morgue was, I heard loud bangs and something similar to cabinets opening up and closing. I did not go near or open that door, seen too many movies to know I'd fuck up. I think the next scariest thing had to be one of the highest floors. Now this is scary because if I was alone, I guarantee you I would have died. The stairs up there kind of split off in 2 directions toward 2 different doors. I was casually walking toward the door to my right, and I feel my friend grab me and yank me back hard. At this point, I'm kind of pissed, like, why'd you do that? He proceeds to show me an area immediately after the door where the floor caved in, and it's an immediate drop. I don't know how far down. I just know it would have been fatal. All in all, scariest building in Laredo. If you're in to visit, I'd warned it, it's fenced off and has no sign, no trespassing. But there are areas where the fence is in such bad condition, you can sneak by. Legally, I will say don't do it, but I'm an internet stranger. I can't tell you what to do. Not a long-haul trucker, but in a van with my brother's band, heading back in the middle of the night from a tour. This must have been around 2008, 2009. I was sat up front, with my bro in the middle. The guitarist in the band was driving. It was a splitter van, so we had 3 seats in the front. Everyone else was asleep in the back. It was about 2 or 3 a.m., and we were on the motorway, headed back to Devon, where we lived. As we were driving along, we noticed a clearing in the trees coming up on the opposite side of the road. It was lit with an eerie green light. As we drove alongside it, all we saw was the silhouette of a body hanging by a rope around its neck from a tree, backlit by this bright green light. We were all super freaked out and discussed whether we should find and slip out and try to go back. We decided we were too scared to do that. So we called the police. We told them exactly where we were, what mile marker we were at, and they said they would investigate it. We called again the next day. They'd gone to look but found nothing. We speculated on what could it have been. But if someone was trying to freak people out with a mannequin, was it an actual suicide? But why the green light? And why did the police find nothing? The weirdest thing about it is that the police found nothing. I would be questioning my own sanity if I'd been the only one to see it, but all 3 of us did. Sober and awake saw it at the same time. It's the only paranormal experience I've ever had. Sounds weird to me 10 years later, though. I'm not a trucker, but I'm a territory manager. My territory goes from New Mexico to Alabama and up to Kansas, so it's not uncommon for me to drive to Dallas, Texas to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then from Albuquerque to Montgomery, Alabama, and then back to Dallas all in 1 week. I've got a couple. I work for a premium off-road lighting company, so we work in the deserts at night a lot. Usually with trophy trucks and Ultra 4 race teams. Last year I was coming home from the King of Hammers, and it was about 4:30 a.m., and I was on a state highway through the desert in southern New Mexico. If you've never driven it, you're basically as far from anything out in the desert as you possibly could be. Impossibly straight, 1-lane highways that stretch from 100 miles. I was awake and alert even though it was so late, and I was totally alone on the road and had been for hours. Suddenly, without warning, while I was trucking along going about 80 miles an hour, the most insanely bright light came out right off my tailgate. It was so bright it lit up everything in the cab. It was so blinding. I thought one of our race teams had snuck up behind me or something and turned on their light bars to screw with me. I drive and wrap in branded distinct show trucks, so it happens a lot. The light stayed on my ass for a good 30 seconds and would stay right on my ass even when I'd swerve a bit or when I moved onto the shoulder a bit. If they would pass, it was weird. It was like that light was bolted on the back of my truck or something. After about 30 seconds, I had enough, so I flipped on my rear-facing lights to give them a taste of their own medicine. Instantly, the light behind me went off, and there was nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Even though I was kind of blinded, I have some really powerful backup lights, and they come on the second the other lights went out, so there is no way whatsoever another vehicle was behind me. And there was just a wide open flat desert all around, so it's not like they could have just pulled off and hid. I would have been seeing them anyways, just nothing. I was totally freaked out. but I'm not an easy scare and very comfortable with being in the desert alone at night. So I pulled over, grabbed my knife and my flashlight, had a look around. I shone my flashlight all around and even some of my portable hyperspots. Again, I work for a lighting company, and I always carry around a ton of demo lights. To look all around me for anything, and there was nothing. No cars, no trucks, aircraft, UFOs, nothing at all except wide open empty New Mexico desert. My truck was totally fine, but I know I wasn't just seeing things because the back of my truck was hot, like way hotter than normal. All the metal on the backside of the tailgate was almost uncomfortable to the touch. I've never figured it out. The only logical possibility I can think of is ball lightning before apparently it's attracted to metal objects. Maybe I found some ball lightning and it stuck to the back of my truck. I've got more stories if anyone's interested. My job has us spend a ton of money, way out in the desert, way too late. Here's another one, ghost headlights. One time I was driving home back from Phoenix, Arizona, and left Phoenix at about 11 p.m., so I could be home near Dallas by early evening. About 3 a.m., I had made it to another one of these super long, barren, stretched out deserts near Las Cruces or El Paso, or who knows. Somewhere on I-10 with dozens of miles between exits and no service roads. I remember thinking how weird it was I was the only person on the road. I distinctly remember it because it was so dark. A minute or two later, I glanced in the rear view and saw headlights in the distance behind me. Maybe 1/2 or 3/4 of a mile behind. Super weird, those for sure headlights, but I hadn't passed any on ramps and there were no troopers hiding off in the road or on the shoulder. Write it off to coincidence. The headlights followed me for a few minutes, never really got closer or farther away, looked away for a split second and looked back. They were gone. Hadn't passed an exit, didn't see them pull off nothing. I mean, who knows, maybe in hindsight it was just a really sneaky trooper who followed me for a bit, see if I was speeding or drunk, but I really would feel like I would have seen them. I was running my big light bar as well, so it was bright as day in front of the truck. I feel like I would have gotten pulled over in a heartbeat if it was a trooper. Just very creepy in the moment, especially as I'm getting kind of weirded out by people following me from time to time after my experience in Sierra Blanca. Okay, how about a twofer before I go to bed? Part of my job is to lead rides around the OHV trails at events and festivals. I have a nice CB radio in my rig for this purpose. They're rather popular in the off-road community to communicate with vehicle to vehicle on trails. I use it occasionally to talk to truckers and bullshit with them on traffic jams. A CB radio can transmit and receive on 40 different channels, and mine has a function where it can run through the channels and listen for a second or two, detect if the signal starts coming through on another channel. That'll be important later. So I'm working on an off-road ramp event in California, and I'd been on the road for a few weeks, and I wasn't ready to come home to the wife and family, so I decided to leave the event mid-afternoon and start making the 20-something hour drive home into the night. I'm a night owl and don't mind loading up on the Monster and beef jerky and just bombing the night and get home faster. So once again, I find myself way out in the desert, way too late. This time, I'm on I-10 in Arizona or West New Mexico. It all looks the same after you go driving long enough. There's a section where you pass a sign that says, next service, gas, food, water, 126 miles. And that is creepy enough to see at 3:30 a.m. I was about 40 miles past this sign, and I decided walking and taking a breather, spotted a fun-looking little trail going off into the desert. Again, marketing loves us when we take a second here, and there's a picture of the trucks doing off-roady stuff, and I work for a lighting company, so I figured I'd take a Zazoo into the desert, turn on the lights, get some cool night shots. So I drive about 2 or 3 miles off the highway into the desert, and I soon find myself in a nice little spot. I get out, my camera out, set up the tripod, start taking pictures of the truck, and I notice there is a green glow in the cab of the truck. Remember my CB? Earlier in the day, it had turned on and left sitting in the passenger seat. It's kind of where the volume control and the screen fit into the handset, and the radio box is hidden in the center console. I had set it to scan the channels and detect new input, which is the common practice at off-road events. If you don't know channel, everyone is on. And then at some point, instead of turning it off, I just turn it way down and never notice it was still on. I grabbed it to turn it off and kill the light, and I heard faint music and noticed it was locked on channel 37. I tuned it up, and sure as shit, the radio was picking up music. It was really slow, sad, violin music. Sounded like the cover of All Along the Watchtower they did for Sons of Anarchy, but sadder. It made every fucking hair in my body stand on end because of the very creepy shit and the mad multitude of reasons. But first and foremost, because CBs do not have a very long range, maybe 2 to 3 miles, and this transmission was super strong, so whatever it was transmitting was close. Also, while I've never seen it strictly enforced, the FCC or whoever doesn't like it, if you do, sold uninterrupted broadcast on CB, so whoever was doing it obviously didn't care about the legality. Also, channel 37 is a weird channel to be on. 19 is a trucker channel, and most of the people I wheel with use 24 for trail comms. I've never seen 37 used. If you're going to play music, why play it on such an odd channel all the way at the top of the band? It was creepy as fuck hearing that music and have no idea who or what could possibly be around, why they felt the need to transmit that music on the radio. I got the fuck out of there pretty quick and kept listening to see if I could gauge how close I was. By the time I got 2 to 3 miles away from the highway, it died and wasn't audible from the highway. That means whatever was transmitting either stationary out in the desert or hadn't followed me or was moving very slowly. I kept moving down the interstate pretty quick after that. And I really wish I had taken note of exactly where I was because I've wanted to go find that trail and see if I pick up anything weird on the radio again. But it was so dark and so late, I really don't remember exactly where I was. That's insane. You can't even rationalize that maybe you forgot. It's just instant teleportation. Here's a link to what happened to me. I'd written it out and I'd posted it to a site in my 20s. I worked for NASA Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California. You know the place with the gigantic blimp hangars? Yep, that's the one. It was a great job with a rotten commute. Took about an hour to go under 25 miles to work. I'm the workaholic type personality, so I left even earlier than I needed to every day. One of the greatest perks was a canteen so you could sit down and have breakfast before things got hectic. An added bonus was that it was so cheap that I could afford it every day. One morning I got up very late. I had to leave about 5:45 to average getting there at 7. It was already 6:45. My alarm clock was old and it had finally died. Jumped up, got dressed, ran out the door. My breakfast today and my boss had the dubious name of Wolf Kale. I don't think he ever got the pun, but he lived up to it. He would corner you at the desk and give you a good 5-minute dressing down at top volume. At best, it would be an hour and a half late. Bay Area traffic is known to be bumper to bumper, even though the freeways are 8 lanes across. Anyone from the Bay Area would be saying and preaching to the choir at this point as an aside, especially on the 101 heading north out of San Jose. The later you leave, the more clogged the freeways are. I had to wait at a metered ramp for 10 minutes just to jump on the Cottle Road. Great. I turned on my usual AM station, KGO, so I could get traffic updates. I went to stress that the update roads every 10 minutes. In about 20 minutes, I had gone maybe 4 miles, nail-biting panic and worrying for the next 40 minutes until I got up to the Logue Avenue exit. It's a cloveleaf with a total pain of a merge. I had to come off the freeway, jump 3 lanes left, hit a left turn with a protected arrow. The whole time I was hearing updates on the time in the traffic. As I merged into the cloverleaf, I heard a pop of air pressure, almost like a storm rolling in. Now here's the fun part. I hit the cloverleaf, Sighed and braced for the merge. No traffic, not one car. It's quiet. I noticed the sky was darker and wondered if there was a storm coming in. The light turned, went green, and I drove the 6 and went blocks to NASA. It's darker still, and the guard barely noticed me at the gate. I was used to seeing the same man every day, at least saying hello. This guy looked wrong. If you pulled someone out of 1950, plunked him down in a mall, you would notice all the details are just enough to grab your attention, without knowing why. It hit me so hard that I watched him in my rearview mirror as long as I could. He never moved or went back to the little guard shack. As I pulled into the parking lot, this is going to sound very loopy by the way, my car radio went silent and everything shifted. Have you ever been blindfolded and spun around and gotten very dizzy? It's that feeling. Everything was subtly different. The lot was empty. I sat there for a minute with my mouth open, trying to figure out if I'd lost my mind. My car radio suddenly blasted back on, and I heard the KGO announcer say, "Good morning, Bay Area. It's 6:29 and the traffic is still light. We'll have updates in 1 minute, but first here's our weather outlook." I checked every station and it was the same. My watch said 8:29. Where did the time go? Did I really want to find out? After all, NASA Ames would have been a good place to monitor if you wanted to see what humanity was up to technologically. The rest of the day went on normally, but I never forgot it. A choice to be made. In 1980, in San Jose, California, I'd recently started seeing someone my age whose family was from Texas and they were religious. Without being the type who preached hellfire and adherence to church going, as I learned about their beliefs, I found that more and more I wanted to be someone of the same belief. One of the conditions was that I would be baptized. I'm sorry, but I don't want to go into any more detail on how this is done. A date was set for this, and the night before I went to bed, a strange dream came to me. San Jose was lines of the foothills on both sides of the valley, and a tall mountain in the southwest called Mount Unumhum. In my dream, a male voice called my name, and found myself walking into the foothills and following roads until they ran out, and I was following gravel roads and old game trails. As I climbed, the voice became louder and more commanding. I was very tired and afraid, but I couldn't deny that voice. I kept climbing. When I got to the top of Mount Unhumhum, at last I was standing in front of a cave. There was snow around the ground, but there was a dull orange glow coming from the cave's entrance. As I debated going in, the man emerged from the entrance and smiled at me. He was the most beautiful being that I'd ever seen. In my mind, he asked me to follow him inside the cave, so I dutifully walked behind him. The glow inside the cave was a massive furnace or crucible, and I could hear screams coming from it. He smiled in delight at the sounds, and his hands were masses of flowers. One by one, he would take a blossom and throw it into the fire, and a horrible, despairing cry came out. I suddenly understood, I don't know how, that he was evil. He had such joy at destroying beautiful things. Then I understood that the flowers were a metaphor for people who were being consumed, along with all their other hopes, joys, and sadness. I said, "You are the evil one," and he laughed as if I were a particular stupid child. Then he held out a flower to me and told me to throw it into the flame. I would have a good life and money, no sadness if I did this. He told me that this was the choice, and the only time I could make it. He was so beautiful and so majestic that part of me questioned if he was really evil, or my mind was twisting what was really happening. I prayed in my mind silently, and suddenly he was changed. There had been a blond man with blue eyes and a smile with all the love in the world that contained in it. It faded, and in its place was a tall being, who seemed to be made of shadows. It had red eyes with the kind of ferocity that you would see in a caged tiger. It laughed at me, and saliva dripped down over its sharp teeth. I felt all the sorrow of all those people, and the whole soul shouted, "No, no, no." He laughed and told me I would find hell in my life, and good riddance to me. In my dream, I ran from that cave out to the brushy hillside. I ran all night, ran down the trails, then roads, then streets, till I got home. I remembered nothing until I woke up the next morning, very early. The whole memory was in my mind. The room was destroyed as if a great tornado had come through. Everything knocked off the walls, furniture uprended, clothes thrown from dresser all over the floor. The strangest thing was my hands were covered with scratches and cuts. My feet were bruised and dirt covered as if I'd walked miles, and I was still in the clothes that I had worn the day before, minus my shoes. I had gone to bed in my pajamas, but my clothes had been on a clothes hamper next to my desk. At this time, I lived with my parents and my sister. They had been home all night. I asked, but noticed nothing unusual. The house alarm had been set all night. If I had been sleepwalking, it probably would have been set off. Of course, I didn't tell them the depth of what had happened. I asked if I'd ever sleepwalked or heard any voices. No one noticed anything at all. The bruises stayed for a week or two, along with the cuts. I never had this type of dream again. And no, I'm not bipolar or schizophrenic. It simply happened one night and stopped when my choice was made. I leave any judgment up to you, the reader. The flip side of this, not that long after, I was given proof of God, a genuine manifestation of it that I saw with my own eyes, if anyone is interested. The Man Made of Light. In 1998, I lived in Hawkins, Texas. My ex-husband and I had a little old house there, set into a grove of trees. The whole town was probably 900 people. Our nearest neighbors were on the other side of a huge line of shrub oak trees that had been there for probably 50 years. We were about 35 miles from Tyler, the closest town of any size, and my husband worked there 4.5 days a week as a live-in guidance counselor for troubled boys. That meant that my little boy and I were on our own most of the time. He was 3 and I cherished the time with him, even when he tried to feed our VCR peanut butter and jelly sandwich. We'd been there for about 1.5 years when one night we started hearing tornado watches pop up on local TV broadcasts. I put him to bed and tried to stay up to make sure nothing was coming close. We were really out in the middle of nowhere and wasn't sure if any emergency personnel would give us any notice of damaging winds or tornadoes. I'd been getting an odd premonition. The oak trees for about 6 months. Every time that I looked at those scrub oaks, I would feel a shiver and a voice kept telling me to cut them. My chance finally came one day when the power company came out, started trimming dead limbs away from the transformer behind our house. I'm not a bit ashamed to say that I paid those nice guys under the table to take down those oaks. Unfortunately, our neighbor had a fit about that one and straddled our mutual property line. He was adamant that I leave that one alone. My husband thought I had lost the plot too. He couldn't figure out why I was on such a tear when those trees gave us privacy and shaded our small yard. I couldn't explain it. I took to watching them every time a storm came through. Well, this one night, the watch boxes were blinking red all over the area map, except for our little county. I fell asleep about 5 a.m. when the map started showing the storm line moving to the northeast at about 35 miles an hour. My son was up early, and I fed him his little breakfast and put him in the corner of the living room in his playpen to watch Toy Story. He loved that film so much, and said in a quiet, "Thank you, God," when I broke it on the 100,000th play. This morning, he was quiet and still sleepy, so I got his favorite blanket and settled him to watch his favorite movie while I did a few breakfast dishes. I had a window right over the sink, and as I looked out, the sky turned an ugly, sickly green. If you've ever seen The Wizard of Oz, you'll know that neon green glow shot through the early morning light. My hair was standing up on my arms, and I quickly threw down the dish towel, took 2 steps toward the living room, and as I did, there was a rumble that shook the house, screaming wind that sounded like a freight train. You felt it as much as you heard it. I could barely keep my feet and heading toward the living room. There was a crack and the whole house shook. I stood there with my mouth open and looked at the window. There was that one big oak tree. The wind grabbed it and twisted it right off at the base, and I watched it lift into the air. The wind flipped it upside down and sent it like a pile driver through my living room ceiling. In the back of my mind, I could hear someone screaming. I keep thinking, why don't they shut up? Then I realized that it was me and my son was buried somewhere under that tree. I screamed so hard that my voice was only a whisper for days. The living room was gone except for the sky through the ceiling and giant broken branches dripping with rain. I really think at that moment I lost my sanity, sank down onto the floor in shock. Something kicked in and I started clearing branches with my bare hands. I was working with tears running down my face. The phone had been in the living room. It was gone. Then I heard a quiet little voice ask, "Why are you crying, Mommy?" The baby was behind me, clean, dry, still sleepy. I asked him where he had been. Here's what he said word for word. "I was sleepy, and a man who made of light came and talked to me. He shined. Mom." He smiled and my heart was so happy. He said, "You need to go to your mommy's bedroom, put your arms around your knees and wait. I'll take care of Mommy." The man carried him into the farthest room, kissed him on the head, and told him not to worry. When he heard the crash, he waited until he heard it get quiet. Then he came in to check on me. There are angels, and one saved my boy. The house was destroyed, but I didn't care. All that mattered was that he was safe. It turned out that that freak straight light wind had cut a narrow path between our house and the neighbors. I don't want to think of what might have happened if those other trees hadn't been cut down. We found a towny house. Nearby, none of our furniture was salvageable. It didn't matter. We were loved and protected. That's enough. The Carriage House. If you read my accounts before, you'll know that I lived in a house built in 1920. It's on a huge plot of land with an original carriage house built on it. When we bought it, my sister and brother-in-law wanted a little house of their own here in Texas, so they renovated the carriage house completely. They took it down to the studs, new wiring, heat, AC, insulation, and put it up in an 8-foot privacy fence toward the alley. These old neighborhoods still have an alley bisecting each block. The carriage house is charming, 2 decks and 2 sets of stairs leading down to the carriage area, and we fitted it out with a washer and dryer storage areas. They decided not to use it, so I bought it from them and I made it a rental property. Now I know it has its own little quirky thing going on. My back porch faces it, so I can see the second floor where the living quarters are. Sometimes I can feel someone looking back at me when I walk in, and I'll have the sense that I've interrupted a conversation. When the renovation was happening, we'd turn everything off, go downstairs, have lunch, go back up, find a radio blaring. The towels of the bathroom, on the floor, or the doors that would be left open were shut. Nothing major, just enough to get our attention. Our new tenant is an old friend. She's cut my husband's hair for 35 years, and I've known her for 17. She's level-headed and logical. She's been there since Hurricane Harvey. She lost her house, unfortunately, and she's going through some personal things. She's just a lovely person who's lavishing the place with love. She has it looking beautiful and homey. So we were very surprised last night when she called and hysterically described being in bed and hearing a conversation in my living room. It was 2 men and she heard them moving from the kitchen to the living room. She was so scared that she locked the bedroom door and didn't go out until it was quiet. She was behind the door with pepper spray and got a frantic message on Facebook that Jeff needed to come up there. She could hear two of them right outside the bedroom, and they opened the bedroom door and slammed it, and last she heard was someone going out the front door, closing and locking it. She said she was trying to pretend to herself that we had gone up there for some reason and hadn't told her. Well, he grabbed shoes, flashlight, and gun, ran up the stairs to her apartment. He checked all of the doors, windows, the second floor, it's on an 18-foot drop to the ground, and the fence gates. They're all locked, very sturdy padlocks. Someone would have had to jump 8 feet. He went through everything and there was no sign of anyone. Our dogs are also great if anyone in the alley would know about it. This being Texas, all of our neighbors are on to anyone not belonging or hanging around. They're also the type to go out with a gun and confront anyone messing with the property. They didn't hear a thing. The dogs never barked, and this was fairly early at night, probably 9 p.m. at the latest. We got her calmed down, but got another message from her. She was blow drying her hair the morning, and blow dryer sparked through the breaker. She had to throw the blow dryer out, and every time she goes to the bathroom, the breaker trips. With all new wiring, I don't see how this is possible. But we'll take the logical approach and replace it and have electronics coming out today. How we're going to calm her down again, I have no idea. Not a very interesting story, but it is puzzling. I might have to go up there and have a little talk with the place and ask them to stop scaring her. My sister and brother-in-law spent one night there, and my sister was very sick at the time. Someone rubbed her shoulder as if to say, "It will be okay." She said it was comforting. Biter. In 1999, my life was a mess. My ex-husband and I recently separated. I had no savings and we wanted our house. It wasn't much, but it was paid for. I was too exhausted to fight him. My father had just died and I traveled to Fort Bliss just in time to say goodbye to him. My parents had visited from California to spend Christmas, and my dad got pneumonia on the way home. That was crushing. When I walked back into the house from the flight, I saw drug paraphernalia along with evidence that another woman had been in my house, my bed, my everything. When a good friend of mine offered to put my son up, in turn for my help, I accepted his offer thankfully. John was a very sweet man, and he had nothing but problems trying to find caregivers who could devote just a few hours an evening. He wanted a little help with dinner and personal care. I really didn't mind. He was funny and sweet, and he'd usually tell me hilarious stories about the women he dated. They averaged being gold diggers or women who were separated and eventually went back to their husbands. I knew he was lonely, and so was I. It was a very simpatico agreement. I loved his huge airy house. It was 2 stories. I'll try to describe this correctly, so as not to be too confusing. From the front, it appeared to be a single-level home. It was set into the hillside, though. So there's another basement level, built out of a set of steep chairs, into the living area. The level had an entire apartment, and on the side faced the back of the house, French doors leading to a little patio and a fire pit. We lived there for about a year, while I worked and put money into the bank as a down payment for another house. My son was 4 at the time and very smart. Very verbal kid. He seems to have a fascination for the basement steps, and I had to keep a constant eye on him to make sure that he never got too close. After a few months, I started to notice that he would play next to the top of the stairs as much as possible, and he kept a running conversation with his toys. One night, I went in to get him, put him in the bath, and looked up at me and asked why the other man in the basement kept asking him to come downstairs. Instant concern for Mom here. I tried to be calm and asked him if I meant John. No. He thought it over and serious and said, no, the man who came into the house at night. A shadow. I asked. No, this man sat on the stairs and called to him and asked him to come down and play. He was tall and thin. What else does he look like? I asked this while I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck. My son looked at me and said, Mom, he walks and there are red spots like ketchup. Anything else? He smiled helpfully. He has really sharp teeth. They're all broken. While putting him in the bed at night was a blur. I was walking the line between, okay, I'm scared, he's a little kid, they make things up, but the next morning I ran to the store, bought baby gates, put them up in the hallway leading to the stairs. My son was told never to play at the stairs again. Funny thing, but after I did that, every single time I went down to the basement apartment to help John, I feel something glaring at me. I would feel my hair on my neck go up. If John wasn't there, I would literally run to get what I needed and escape up the stairs as soon as possible. It was like I felt pure hate directed at me. I asked John about what my son was saying after about a month of feeling this hate and told him what my son was describing. John told me to sit down and he told me a story. 10 years before, John was not yet a paraplegic. He'd worked for a computer company, and this involved traveling to a few locations for IT support. One night, he was driving in Illinois very late, and he'd stopped at a rest stop for the restroom and a coffee from the machines there. As he walked into the men's facilities, he noticed that they were empty, and he quickly used the toilets, went to wash his hands. He glanced up, and there was a tall, thin man watching him, a man all in black. John freaked out because he'd appeared out of nowhere. He then glanced up again, and the man was right next to him. In a matter of a couple of seconds, this man had moved probably 20 feet and was so close that John could feel his breath on his face. No human being could move that fast. John swore to me that he'd seen a vampire. I didn't believe that, but I kept a poker face. John poured a very large bourbon, and he was shaking when he told me the next part. The man smiled, but it wasn't a smile. It was a baring of a huge broken sharp teeth. John said he ran for his car, like he knew his life depended on it, as if he drove away from the rest stop. This thing was following him on the road, running after the car. Shortly after that, John was in a terrible accident and was paralyzed. I couldn't stay. I just couldn't. I told John we were leaving in 2 weeks, that they would give him time to find another caregiver. I quickly found us another apartment and kept an eagle eye on my son until the day we left. As I was putting my son into the car, he suddenly said, Mom, he's mad. He wanted me to stay forever. I faked a smile and asked, who, baby? With great dignity, my son said, Biter. He hates you. You. He wants me to live with him, but you would be boo-booed like Mr. John. I felt a cold sweat go down my neck. He lives with Mr. John, but he said, you would go with Pop Pop. My recently deceased dad was Pop Pop. The last day, I cried in relief as I pulled out of the driveway. We had been so close to pure evil. My son waved and called, bye, Mr. John, bye, Biter. I watched the rearview mirror until I hit the highway in case anything was running after the car. The Copper Queen. My story centers around an old copper mining town in Arizona called Bisbee. It's only 8 miles north of the Mexican border, and it's a little slice of the 1880s, right down to the Grand Dame Hotel in town, the Copper Queen. I lived in California growing up, but moved to Texas in my 30s, and wound up engaged in the love of my life. Unfortunately, the timing was off for us then. He was recently a widower, and I had a young son, an ex-husband who was a pain, and an ill, elderly mother. Regretfully, we called off the marriage, and I moved back to California California. To make this short, 7 years ago I moved back to Texas, ran into my boy through a strange set of circumstances, and we decided pretty quickly that someone, maybe his late wife or maybe my late mother or father, wanted us to finally get together and stop faffing around. This is where the Copper Queen comes in. Honest. We were getting married and we wanted it to be an adventure. He wanted to get married in Tombstone, Arizona, but I'd wanted to see Bisbee for a very long time. We looked around for wedding venues, and you could be married in the upper sitting room of the Copper Queen Hotel. They're only 30 miles apart, so we could spend a day or two in Tombstone also. Perfect. After the wedding, we could spend a couple days exploring Bisbee and then see the gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone. The hotel itself is a 4-story stucco-fronted mansion with a series of terraced steps leading up to it. It overlooks the entire town. It's rumored to be very haunted, and it conducts ghost tours. Not far from it are the copper mines, which also have a reputation for spirits being seen. We checked in, and they had 2 rooms for us to choose from. The Julia Lowell room, reportedly haunted by a prostitute who killed herself, and the John Wayne room. He was a frequent guest when he was shooting films and was known for having the room closest to the bar so that he could find his room after a night of drinking in the saloon at the hotel. They took us first to see the Julia Lowell room. I walked in and was immediately hit with, "I see you. Not on my wedding night, no thank you." I noped out of there as fast as humanly possible. My oblivious fiancé argued about it all the way down to the John Wayne room, and I couldn't understand my no just no, but hell no attitude. The John Wayne room was homage to his movies. Fiancé settled down pretty quickly when he saw it. He'd been a cowboy in Kansas for 20, so this was nirvana to him. We got married in the sitting room on the 3rd floor in front of a beautiful fireplace at sundown, in Levi's. Much to the amusement of people wandering through the oops, the gingerly backing out of the wedding. It was funny and sweet, and we loved it. We had dinner in the hotel restaurant and followed it up with a few drinks in the hotel saloon. We got up to our room and unlocked the door. I flipped on the light switch. It flipped back off. I did this a couple more times, and each time the lights all switched off again. Okay, then we turned on the TV. It died. We had to call down to the office and have them bring up a whole new TV. This was getting interesting. I had the feeling of energy everywhere in this hotel, but whatever it was felt curious, not threatening, so I shrugged it off. At least the lights were finally working. We went up to sleep somewhere around 1 a.m. I have no idea what time the noise woke me up, but I was hearing people in the sitting room or common room on the floor arguing. It was a man and a woman. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but it was some kind of fight where you hiss insults at each other. They had also turned on an antique radio that I had seen because I could hear music too loudly through the door. I could have told you the name of the song, but it reminded me of the Tennessee Waltz. I looked out of the peephole, but the sitting room was just all left. All that I could see was the stairwell leading down to the lobby. I wasn't about to open the door. My husband told me not to overreact, and maybe they'd quiet down. Instead, they got louder to the point where they were yelling, but trying to keep volume down because the area being a public space. I asked my husband to go out and break it up, but he refused to go out and get involved in a domestic dispute, especially between drunks. Things sounded like they were breaking glasses. Was she throwing things at his head? About 20 minutes of this, and I got fed up and headed for the door. As I did, it sounded like an argument moved into the room a couple doors down. I heard their door open and slam twice. The voices were still yelling, but they were behind a closed door now. Still, this was ridiculous. I called the manager on duty down in the lobby. The manager listened to me rant for a couple of minutes, then said, "Ma'am, can you calm down to the lobby?" 30 seconds later, we were downstairs and I smiled apologetically and pointed to the room where the noise was. He looked at me with the blankest expression. I grabbed my husband and he too told the manager all about the drunken roaring fight that had been going on for quite a while. The manager turned the printed register around to face us where he could see the room assignments. The room 2 doors down? Empty, unoccupied. The room next to us? Empty. 2 more rooms close to us? Empty. His expression clearly said that he thought we'd lost our minds. Now the lobby is 1 floor down, and you can almost see it from the open stairwell. They had heard no fight, no door slams, and hadn't heard the music. Thank God my husband heard it too. Anyone coming from the bar would have had to pass through the lobby and the manager on duty, who would have seen them. Besides, as it turned out, the bar had been closed for a couple of hours. He even pointed out that there were cameras in the lobby. No one had come in or out. I had tried to note my way out of a haunted wedding, but the Copper Queen had the last word. We're going back there in January for our anniversary. We haven't tried the mining tours yet. Could be even more interesting. When I was in high school, I'd spend most evenings at my friend's house with him and his mom. Their home had basically become my second home. I showed up early one day while my friend was still at practice. His mom didn't mind though. She invited me in, and she'd be home soon. We can play some dominoes or something till he comes home. She had always told me stories about a ghost she had in her house, doing all the normal ghost shit. Turning on lights, turning on water, faucets, footsteps, and opening doors. I always thought she was just trying to scare me, until this night. We sat down at the table and scrambled our dominoes face down to set up for our game. I grabbed my stack, and she hers. I started setting mine up on the sides in a row, placing them in order I wanted to play them in. We were playing maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and my turn was coming up. I reached for the domino I wanted to play, and just as I was going to grab it, it began sliding side to side rapidly in a very jagged motion, almost like when 2 opposing magnets push away from each other, making a sort of foot-long Z shape. It happens in an instant, and I sat there sort of puzzled for a second. I wasn't scared. There wasn't any ominous music going, no heavy, dark, or uncomfortable presence. I was just puzzled, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Looking at the table, thinking she hadn't seen what happened, I asked, "Are there magnets in these dominoes?" "No," she yelled before I could finish. "And that domino just moved. I told you I had a ghost in my house." The memory is etched into my mind, and I will never forget it. I can still hear every inflection in her voice, the look on her face, and the vivid image of the domino still standing on its side after sliding across the table in front of me.